Thank you very much for having me along, lads.
Now, Mark, we discussed this the other day. I'm also an O'Reilly. My name is Nathan O'Reilly. You're Mark O'Reilly. I don't know, Graham. Like myself and Mark, we look very similar. We have the same hair and we're both absolutely shredded.
No, I'm from different gene pools, I think you and Mark are from.
I'm thinning on top.
Mark, we're a couple of days out from the Dublin Half Marathon. If anybody is listening that is about to embark on it, do you have any tips this far out on how they can be preparing for it?
Yeah, I think, naturally, if they've got to this stage now, they've done a lot of the hard work. So I think it's important to remind yourself that you've done the hard yards now. And what you do over the next couple of days is more just about really tuning everything in for the day itself. I think in particular, most people this week are going to be doing very little training. So nothing too intense, nothing too long. You don't want to sit around like a couch potato for the week because you don't want to be stiff. So it's about getting out, light walking, etc. Plenty of stretching. Like I say, it's about trying to really focus on your recovery and also your nutrition this week. I think people have this idea that I need to get as many carbs in from, say, Monday, but you also don't want to come into Sunday feeling too bloated. So your strategy needs to look like maybe 3 days before that you're starting to take in, I would say, keep it simple, 2 extra snacks on the 3 days before the actual race. So that might look like mid-morning having a bagel with some peanut butter on it that you might not normally have. And then obviously mid-afternoon, maybe having some granola with some fruit and some yogurt in between those 3 main meals. Now, the actual day of the race...
You don't want to be mixing things up. You don't want to be having a Vindaloo before you're going on a run.
It's definitely not the night before, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, the old burning ring of fire. Johnny Cash will be in your ear following you. I do want to ask, I'm fascinated by those sucky gels, Mark.
Yes.
So if you bring them with you on the day and you're running like a gazelle, when do you actually take in those sucky gels? And can you take a bit too much of them that you start, hallucinating?
Well, there are ones that have caffeine and ones that don't. So maybe if you are prone to hallucination, don't take the ones with the caffeine. What I would say is that roughly what you're going to need over, let's say it's going to take most people about 2 hours to complete this half marathon. You want to be taking in roughly about 30 grams of carbohydrates every 30 minutes. Those gels will generally have about 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates. So you want to be taking one of them roughly every half an hour. Now, the other side of it is sometimes the gels can upset people's stomachs. So there are alternatives that, believe it or not, like I did in June there, I did the Cork Marathon, and I don't really like taking a lot of gels. So I may have had maybe 2 or 3, but I also brought like easy, say, things like Rice Krispie squares. Obviously you stick it in your mouth, you kind of chew it slowly. Obviously you're not going to be stopping or anything.
Yeah, of course.
But there are alternatives, like sports drinks as well can be very effective. And maybe what I would say to people is, this is a tip that a lot of people, you'll see it on the day. When you get to the water stations, a lot of people try to drink and run at the same time. Generally ends in disaster, liquid all over you. I would advise everybody to stop and walk those water stations. It's only going to be 10 to 15 seconds, but you'll be able to take in the, obviously, hydration that you need or the sports drink that you need. And it's not going to knock off too much time overall. So walk the water stations, take a drink, and then get yourself going
Mark,
again.
Can I ask about music? Do you recommend people listening to music or be alone with their very dark thoughts?
On the day of a race, I 100% recommend music. Start with something nice and mellow. So you might, for me, it's maybe a bit of like Bruce Springsteen as I start, and then as I come to the end, it's kind of increase to Tiesto by the end of the race, to get me over the finish line. So I'm a big fan of music, but what I would also say naturally for people is that do what you are comfortable and familiar with. If you never run with music and that's what you like, go and do that. Don't change things up too much on the day of the race is probably the biggest bit of advice.
Some great tips there for this Sunday, the half marathon. But for anybody who is doing the half marathon but then going to do the full marathon, you said yourself you did it in Cork this year, any tips on tackling that?
Yeah, I think naturally people will come across the line on Sunday and they will think, why did I do that? But then very soon after that they think, actually, I wouldn't mind doing that again, or I wouldn't mind doing a full marathon. I think ultimately it's taking that little bit of time to let your body recover. But then when you step into full marathon training, for me, it's getting the endurance in the legs. So when you go out at the weekend, it's just gradually over time building up that long run that you're doing. During the week, your training doesn't have to change that much, but it's just increasing that distance at the weekends, doing those slow, steady runs. And gradually over time, you may not be ready to do the full marathon this year in October, but certainly if you're able to complete a half marathon, you will be able to, in time, do a full marathon. It's just about building it up gradually over time and getting the body ready. So that's probably my biggest tip, is focus on those weekend runs if you're thinking I'd like to do a full marathon, and just small percentages each week, increasing your time and your distance in those slow, steady runs.
How many marathons have you done in total?
Believe it or not, I was actually more triathlon and Ironman, and it's only recently that I have switched to marathon. So this year was actually my first marathon.
Okay.
But my endurance background would be more in triathlon and Ironman distances.
Yeah.
So I've done 8 or 9 Ironman triathlons to this moment. I qualified for the World Championships a little while ago. Probably a bit off that level of fitness now, but I like the variety of the triathlon. But having done the first marathon this year, I'm like, sign me up for the next one. Just the atmosphere is incredible. And there's a lot less you've got to carry around with you. I don't need a bike or goggles or a
What's your
swimming hat.
favourite thing to do in the triathlon?
Running. So
Is it?
well suited to then switch to the marathon.
Mark O'Reilly, founder and CEO of Fitvision, thank you so much for joining us today and the tips. And if anybody wants to find more about Fitvision, where can they find out?
Fitvision.ie.
Simple
Thank you
as
very
that.
much.
Mark, you're a gentleman. Thank you so much.
Thank you.